Welcome, Darklings, to Season 3 of the Reign of Blood podcast. I'm Ember, one of your hosts, here to introduce you to the shadowy depths of what hopes to be our most sinister season yet. This season, your unholy trinity of organizers and hosts, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and myself, have entirely way too much fun with the Summer of Stabs, our 80s horror-themed series that promises to be both educational and thrilling. Our aim is to explore the macabre beauty that lies in the shadowed, or maybe not so shadowed, spaces of desire. Leading up to Reign of Blood Nightfall, our advanced Halloween extravaganza, we'll be discussing topics such as embodied and informed consent, risk mitigation, and other helpful tips, ensuring that every prick, slice, and puncture is as thought through as it is sensational for you. We'll also continue interviewing sharks enthusiasts from around the world to find out what makes the blood-loving heart tick. And maybe we'll talk Miss K into recording some more horror meditations for us. Join us as we explore the eerie, the edgy, and the exquisitely sharp. This is Reign of Blood, where the macabre meets the magnificent, and the only limit is your imagination, risk profile, and informed consent. Let the Summer of Stabs begin. But first, a content warning. This podcast is not suited for individuals who are not legal adults, are not interested in heavier BDSM practices, who are presently having severe mental or relationship health concerns, or who do not already understand basic BDSM practices regarding consent, ethics, risk mitigation, etc. Topics may include things like mental health issues, social issues, injustice, blood and sharks, of course, medical trauma, medical issues, trauma of various types, and more. Listener discretion is heavily advised. Hello and welcome back, listeners. And we are back with another episode with me, and I am bringing you back another guest that I met from TES Fest. So it was obviously a really, really productive TES Fest for me. So joining me today is Beyondnewwmatt. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself for listeners here?
Sure thing. Hello, listeners. Hi, my name is Beyondnewwmatt. You can call me Matt. I am in Florida. I've been in the scene down here since I would say about 2018, and I'm an energy enthusiast. I'm a rope enthusiast, and I'm also an exceptional blood enthusiast as well. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Absolutely super excited to have you. And I've not had the chance to sit through one of your classes yet because I seem to always be presenting at the same damn time. But I hear wonderful things about some of your classes that you present on. So tell listeners a little bit more about kind of what you generally present on, because these are some pretty unique topics that I don't think we hear a lot about.
Sure thing. So actually, a good portion of my classes that I present on is actually rope. That's actually majority of my classes. That's the hard skill that I actually present on. I've been doing rope for about, I want to say, 7+ years already. And I kind of came into the rope scene just by, I went to two different classes. One I didn't kind of click with, another one I really did when I first came down here. And I started off as actually a bottom, then I started self-tying, then I became, now I'm more of a rope top these days, but I still like to switch with it every now and then. And I just kind of took off on that journey. And the other class I teach is energy play. I also do energy play with rope as well, and energy play with other kinks as well. I do a class called Unfucking Your Relationship and Dynamic, which is more about communication, finding things how to improve relationships within kink.
Wonderful.
And yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about energy play. I know we've probably folks have heard the term, but I don't know that we have necessarily always great resources to define it.
Yes, so I actually do have a definition that I wrote down a very long time ago on this as I am pulling this up. Okay. So energy play is a subjective emotional practice that is frequently transcendental through one's connection, generally speaking, within the boundaries of engaged and informed consent. The top will seek to stimulate a response from the bottom, or the bottom can seek to stimulate a response from the top, and vice versa with switches and so on and so forth.
So I love that.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like in practice for you?
That looks like in practice for me, it's me actually connecting and engaging with the person that I am playing with.
Mhm.
Uh not just what they are giving, what I'm giving to them in the scene, but what they are giving to me as well. And there's actually a great definition that I was taught by actually my own sibling, which is called energy recycling,
Hmm.
where we start things off in our energy, we break it down, and then we pass it to the next person. And they break down all that energy and they pass it right back to us, and so forth, where it becomes this infinite cycle of energy recycling.
I like it. So we have a concept
Mhm.
in relationship science that's sounds very similar, and it's called attunement, and it's the process
Oh.
of becoming more present and aware in the moment and
Mhm.
attuning into the thoughts, emotions, and presence of another human being. And it sounds like attunement based skills are very critical in this, but it sounds like it also kind of steps beyond that into the realm of actually kind of, I know we often have negative terms surrounding the term manipulation, but toward
Mhm.
manipulating or playing with that attunement or with that sense of
Mhm.
other to create an experience. Does that sound about right?
Actually, yeah. That hits the nail on the forehead right there. That we were actually both in tune with one another. We're actually uh, really exchanging each other's life forces, and to the point where we just end up in a blissful goo.
Beautiful. I love it. So I know you mentioned that you do a lot of this with rope and things, but how did
Mhm.
you start getting involved in this kind of play?
I started getting involved in it when I think I was at a party at a dungeon, and I was watching a lot of the scenes that were going on and how so many people were having fun. There was so much variety of different scenes that night. There was rope, impact, uh, needles, flogging, you name it, sensational. And just and I was hit with a wave. I don't know what it was, but I was hit with a wave. And the person who was DMing that night comes right up next to me. Like I felt like I was spooked for a second, but they came up right next to me. I'm like, do you sense that? I'm like, I didn't know what it was. I don't know if it was something I was tasting or smelling or whatever it is. And she pauses to me and goes, "That's the energy." And I go, the what now? And they're like, the energy. I'm like, I'm trying to understand what it is. And it was something that she already knew and felt, but I didn't get much of a definition out of it. So I went out to find out what this energy and energy play was to me. Um, I almost kind of broke it down like a science. Almost felt like I was Doc Brown from Back to the Future on the chalkboard trying to figure this all out.
I love
And
it.
to, yeah, I kind of felt like I had a dog named Einstein and a Marty McFly trying to explain what this is, but it really wasn't working out. And I think she was right. It's just something I had to experience one day. And then just one day I was just doing a scene, and there was something, and I was topping in it, and there was something that my body did. It was a reaction, and I responded off of that reaction, and they responded off of my reaction, and so forth, where I just kind of almost became this never-ending reaction junkie. And that's what I was feeding off of. And I go, I think I understand what this is all about.
It's a beautiful moment when it kind of clicks and starts to feed like that, and
Mm-hmm.
it's its own language and communicative field in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said that you were fairly new in your journey with sharps and blood play in particular, but have you had much of an opportunity to either watch people applying this kind of play within that field or to do so yourself much?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things I'm trying to start off, which should I go first? With my personal experience or me as a voyeur? Because I think I have more
Mhm.
stories as a voyeur. And some are just one of the most fascinating scenes where that even though that that maybe like like each person like the goals are different, the objective at the moment of the scene is the absolute same, where it's just kind of completely entwining. And I've seen so many different scenes in sharps from actually there's a good way to describe this. I was talking about this with my mentor at the time, who is actually now my brother, chosen brother. uh And I asked him this, I'm like, like where do you find is like a more deeper connection to you when you're doing needles? And he said, well, when I'm with that kind of partner and I am not sticking and I'm sticking them without gloves.
Hmm.
And I go, and that was kind of deep to me
Mhm.
because I've never done that. I don't know what that feels like. But to him, he will wear gloves in all the scenes except for especially the partners that he's fluid bonded with.
Mhm.
And when he has that kind of intimacy, that's when he removes the gloves. And
Hmm.
I found that fascinating.
So for him, a certain he has certain rituals associated with different levels of connection that
Hmm.
are almost representative of certain levels of emotional connectivity in those scenes.
Absolutely.
I like it. I like it a lot. There's I have some similar kinds of things that I do, depending. So my play partners frequently, if it's one of my personal play partners, if they're down on their stomach or something, um, they will usually grab my leg for grounding effects or something of that nature, so that there's always some level of connection or touch, of physical touch or grounding, other than my hands that I'm working on.
Hmm.
Because for one, I always use gloves altogether, even with my partner whose blood I consume.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is one, it's easier for me to just do that because I'm never going to be able to really get my hands clean enough for my own personal
Hmm.
well being. And two, it's a lot easier altogether for me to do it that way. Um, and then also,
my hands are rather calloused, so they don't have a lot of sensation in them. I've done a lot of work outside. I grew up in a equestrian background with doing a lot of labor outside. So I have very tough hands that don't necessarily always read a lot of really soft kind of touches. But other parts of my body are much more sensitive. So I do something similar in regards to other areas to be able to connect like that. So I can relate to that and the need for some level of a grounding touch in some other areas. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. So what are some of the other things and other ways that you've seen or applied with people engaging in this type of play for blood and sharp specifically? Because I think it can often look a little bit differently. Like within my primal play, it looks drastically different, usually speaking,
Mhm.
um, than how people are typically expecting for blood and sharps, where for the most part, it has to be so precise.
I, that's a good word that you describe it as precise. I would actually kind of call it more as patience.
Mm.
That when I was approaching any kind of sharps play, especially when I first started sticking, I felt like I needed patience, which is something
Mm.
I don't have a whole lot of.
Mhm.
And I never had a whole lot of it. I'm neurodivergent. I was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD at the age of 3. So it was a skill that was never really born with me. Luckily, I had a lot of support and help, and people kind of lead me into the right direction. I had like a good brother, a good sibling who are both into sharps as well, who really questioned and challenged me of like, no, why do I want to do this?
Mm.
And I really didn't know. I really didn't know. I had to kind of figure that out. Uh, and I remember another friend of mine who was also starting to learn how to do sharps. Actually, she was the first person I stabbed, and she loaned me a book she was reading called um, I'm not sure if you heard of this, called the Piercing Bible.
Mhm.
You know that? Yeah, the Piercing Bible. Now, I haven't read the whole thing of it, but I have read excerpts of it. And one of the things that she was talking about, the author's name, uh, is it Elaine Angel? Am I getting that correct?
Let me see if I can remember. I think it is Elaine Angel.
It is Elaine Angel, yes. Okay,
Hmm.
it is
Yes.
Elaine Angel, yes. She's a professional piercer. Yeah, and I remember she was talking about so many different ways how piercing can be. It could be like a rite of passage, it could be very
Hmm.
therapeutic, it's something taking like a next step. And
Hmm.
that's like the best way I connected with that. I connected that this is my next step. That I came from the background of like, I will not look at this, touch this, not even be in the same room as this, to now I'm ready to take this next step. And the next step that I wanted, and she was talking about, is to be a piercer, you have to have patience.
Hmm.
But the way she was like talking about it did not feel daunting at all. It didn't feel anything that would scare me away from this. It just helped me embrace it even much more. And that I understand that the safety and the risk factor is now higher than even in most games because we were playing with our lives and blood and all those kind of beautiful, delicious things. And I just wanted to be part of it. And the patience and the calmness kind of grew inside of me as I started to learn the intricacies of stabbing. Uh, I started on I started on fruit and my own leg, and then next thing you know, I started working on people that said, "Hey, I will do this thing with you."
I love it. There's also, I think, for me, one of the key differences is sometimes in sharps we do a lot of things for the pretty, or for the photo, for the effect of what it looks like. And sometimes I think within some of these more photo friendly kinks, it can be easy to overlook the sharps as a tool in and of themselves to create and elicit those responses. And that is probably my favorite thing about all things sharp and evil, is being able to adjust and use them as such tools of variety, based on angles of entry or how you want to do it. Just the way that it can create something not just on the skin or to see, but kind of presses the button in the person that I'm stabbing. It makes it
All
easy.
those delicious buttons, all those delicious buttons.
Exactly. I'm I am a lazy ass sadist. Let's be real. I'm chronically ill as hell and I have limited fucking energy. Um
You are preaching to the choir right now.
I don't have a whole lot of goddamn energy in life. I work on very minimal spoons. It is, there's only so many Florentine whips scenes I can do in a night before I am utterly toast. Or I throw my shoulder out because I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos and my joints just randomly decide to fall out of socket, because I'm a human pretzel. So I think one of the things that I really love about sharps is the capacity to be so precise with what I'm doing and elicit such a dramatic response, even without stabbing. Sometimes just the threat can be such a great thing. And just using them as a tool, or using them as a tool for relaxation. My play partners are people who end up being so relaxed and giggly with them, or just, they're such great tools, I think, that lend themselves to this kind of a connection, at least in my experience.
Absolutely, especially like when they open up that panel for you, you're just like, what happens if I push this one and that one and that one and that one? And you just see like just the delicious responses you get. Sometimes you'll get like a giggle, sometimes you'll get a moan,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you'll get a whimper, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a cry, and each one
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely delicious. It's literally a fine chill glass of Merlot.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Hmm.
And it is beautiful, and I think it's I think that's one of the reasons I really love my scalpels in particular, is because it not only is it pressing those buttons, but it really is a symbolic release of so many things. And in addition to being able to watch the blood pour to some degree, safely and appropriately. Keep in mind, this is usually capillary bleeding that we're talking about here, people. Um, Capillary bleeding, not anything risky. Um, Also, just having a cathartic release of various emotions that comes with it, various experiences, and just being able to kind of open Pandora's box a little bit and see what the hell comes out. Because I never know.
Mhm.
I never know what the hell is going to come out, whether it's going to be tears, whether it's going to be giggles, whether it's going to be orgasms. I've had people orgasm just from me cutting them. Like there are people who will orgasm from cuttings. There are people who will just sob in just relaxation or fear or whatever the hell comes out. And it's such a unique experience. It's like unwrapping the best gift ever. And you just never know what the hell is going to be in there. And I really enjoy that experience with it. So I think we often don't consider sharps when it
Mhm.
comes to energy play a whole lot. But, at least in my experience, I don't know if you would concur, I think it almost makes an ideal tool for it.
I absolutely think so, because the first time when I stabbed someone other than myself or a piece of fruit, I felt I remember they were lying face down on a massage table, and it was a complete, like, more of a learning experience than anything. It wasn't like a full-on scene. And I did toe topping. Um and the one thing that I felt was a wave of energy that was radiating from their back.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of feel this sense of warmness that comes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can feel that through my gloves, into my fingertips, up my entire arm, and up to the back of my neck. I
Love
can
it.
feel it. I can absolutely feel it. And when I think what I found helpful is that we were breathing together
Mm-hmm.
while I was hitting each stab. Each stab, we were breathing synonymously,
Mm-hmm.
and that bonded the connection right there.
So, what are some other tips or exercises that you would suggest for folks who are interested in kind of getting into more of this kind of a connection?
I would say get to know the person you're playing with. Really just spend the time to get to know the person you're playing with. That the scene doesn't start when you take the first stab. The scene starts when you have, like, that conversation. It really begins at that one inception of that you want to do that we want to do as much as we can to understand the person that's across from us, and hopefully that they're going to reciprocate, and they're going to want to understand us. So we're now just entwining with one another. And even though that at the end of the night, we're going to go to bed, we're going to go to sleep, and we're going to eventually talk about this again, we're gonna hop back on this conversation as if we just talked about it like 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the questions that you will typically ask folks when determining whether or not they're a good fit for you for this kind of play?
Uh, so in the forms of energy play with blood, are we talking about?
Any and all of
Because
the above.
okay, so with energy play, I want to understand now with any kind, uh, what encourages them to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what encourages them to do this today?
Mm-hmm.
And what encourages them to do this with me?
Mm.
Those are some big questions, actually. And And sometimes those questions are answered can be answered very quick, and sometimes it just takes some time. And I think overall, it just takes patience for those answers to arise. I would say, in the forms of blood play, it's a little bit different for me because I do like to understand the person. Like for me, I would like for me, I want to make sure that we're all as safe as possible. I like to use barriers. I like to use my gloves unless I'm actually fully fluid bonded with the person. Even if I even have to show like my recent test results, I have no problem doing that either. I like to have that kind of exchange, and most importantly, it builds trust. It builds trust because if we don't have that kind of trust, why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
That I want them to trust in me, but I also want to trust in them as well.
Mm-hmm. Be able to create a emotionally safer space to be able to have that kind of vulnerability. Uh, Defensiveness, one of the four horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. Defensiveness, criticism,
Mhm,
contempt, and stonewalling. Not great things for any and all relationships.
mhm.
So overall,
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing you say is basically having good relationship hygiene and good relationship skills altogether, and
Yes.
being able to communicate well, and being aware of each other's boundaries, honoring and creating trust there, uh, and also being willing to have a frank look at our own motivations and desires and being
Mhm,
honest about them, both with ourselves and with other people. Manufacturing things
mhm,
and manufacturing answers to fit, I think, here
mhm.
is not gonna go super well. Uh,
I I would say this. It takes two people to do this. It takes more than one person to do this dance with one another. If I feel like I'm doing this alone, then I can actually predict that this is not going to turn out well for either one of us. So I will even say that right now. I'm like, hey, I think we're kind of like at a roadblock. There's something a little off here. And hopefully I expect the other person can speak up about that as well. I understand like our feelings are valid, but I don't want to take that personally. And I always want to put myself in the other person's shoes to understand where they're coming from. So we
Mhm,
can actually kind of come to some sort of resolution.
mhm.
And if I was kind of feeling that same way, that they want to do the same thing with me in return. And hence we have that kind of trust, emotional trust.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Matt. This has
Mhm.
been a wonderful, enlightening conversation. If folks wanted to take a look at some of the rest of your work or join in some of your classes, where could they find you?
Absolutely. You can actually follow me on my web page. It is Beyondnewwmatt with two W's. That's BeyondNewwmatt. I think I'm teaching two other energy play classes later this year. One is energy play with rope, and another one's just kink energy play. And yeah, I have a few other coming up this year. So if you feel free to follow me and even send a message and say hello. And hopefully things are all right.
Well, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you more on the Rain of Blood and Let It Ring platforms.
Absolutely. You know what? Thank you for having me. This is really awesome. And you know what? And you know what? You're doing a lot of good with this. So you know what? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we will see you next time, listeners. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for joining us today. And Have a great time.
Absolutely.